quorum.
I will call the roll. Sharon? Ms. Dearden?
Here.
Mr. Donnelly?
Yes.
Mr. Slay?
Here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Pidtuck?
Here.
Mr. Smith's going to be late, and Ms. Wysong? Here. You have a quorum, Chair.
Okay, next we have the approval of minutes from April 18th. Did everyone get a chance to look it over?
Do you want to do citizens comment?
Sorry. We have a citizens comment period. Do we have anyone here? So we'll go ahead and close that. Now we have the approval of the minutes from April.
Second.
Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those are approved. Do you have a treasurer's report for us?
Yeah. Okay. CDs, the ending balance is $194,938.91. There is one CD at C&F Bank coming, maturing the end of this week, next week. And so that will roll and should have a increased interest rate attached to it. Inside the checking account, there were only two pieces of activity. The first one is a check that we wrote, that we approved last meeting for LaClaire Ryan for $1,300 and change. And then we had a deposit from Licking Hole Creek, an early July installment, so that was nice to see. Resulting in a checking account balance of $487,897.72 for a total of $682,836.63.
Okay, anything else, any comments, questions?
Just one quick comment as it relates to finances. Randomly, I was actually in C&F Bank last week on a personal matter, and they mentioned wanting to come talk to EDA about, I guess, the existing CDs and potential relationships moving forward. So I told them I would pass that along.
Thank you.
So I'm passing that along. I guess they saw when I was doing what I was doing, I was an employee of Goshen County, and the relationship banker, I guess, was aware of the CD. So I'm doing my duty to pass that along.
No, I have not had time. I was on vacation for 2 weeks this month. So.
The treasurer on that issue is out of office right now, dealing with some personal issues. So I'm sure her assistant may be able to work with you on that. But her return right now is not, there's not a date specific.
Is having the CNF rep come to present something that y'all want to, we should do?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, sure. They're not comparable rates, are they? Especially with the Commonwealth Fund.
It'd be nice to have somebody that were eager to take our money.
Right.
So Matt will contact them, and they can maybe come to one of our June or July board EDA meetings.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right, moving on to scheduled matters. We have some guests today, Carlos and Britta Cruz. We have Matt coming today.
Yep.
Matt, do you want to let me know when to open the presentation?
I was going to open it.
Go ahead.
All right.
And just click that arrow at the
Yeah.
bottom. Are you going to do it
I'll
for them
do it.
while they talk?
Oh,
Yeah, it's over there. Just click it on the bottom.
Hi.
Hello.
Right down here. We'll take them to the next screen. You click that.
y'all gonna, where are y'all?
I'm actually gonna stand if that's okay.
Yeah.
Not a big center.
like really skeptical over there. How are you?
No, I'm not.
No, this is Britta and
I don't read anything into my page.
People talk that all the time.
So I'm not the first one, right?
Right.
Thank you. So I'm Richard Cruz. This is my husband, Carlos Valdez, who apparently likes to sit.
Ah, that's silly.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and meet all of you and do a short, quick presentation to see if there's an opportunity for us to be able to access some funds that I understand you have available for economic development. So,
And just click this arrow down here. Right here. Right there.
I'll try.
There you go. There you go. Let me have it. Just click that right there. It should go to the next one.
No, plus-
page
Left
down,
side.
page downward.
It should do it automatically.
No, I just write it there.
There you go.
So who are we? Immigrants like all of us in this country. I'm originally from Germany, and Carlos is originally from Guatemala. We are American citizens. That was one of Carlos's wish list when he came to this country, and we checked that out a couple of years ago, and I became a citizen last year. And my background is in marketing. I have a degree in marketing and public relations from the University of Munich, and I worked for the last 20 years. I'm dating myself in organ and tissue procurement and transplantation with one of the largest organ procurement organizations in the country in Chicago, and my latest stint in that field was with Life and Health that's based in Virginia Beach. Carlos has worked in restaurant management, even though over the last couple of years since we moved to Virginia, we made a change where Carlos stayed home with our wonderful children and has become pretty active in the community. I think that's why everybody knows him and nobody knows me. This is the woman that he's married to. Anytime that I go anywhere, they're like, oh, he really does have a wife. Then change has really worked well for us, but again, Carlos had a little wish list when he came to this country, and having his own business was another one of those items that is on that list. We've always had an interest in organic farming and sustainable living, and when I met Lisa, it was on my quest in Henrico County, where it was known as the illegal chicken coop. We ended up on the news, and Lisa came and rescued us, so we didn't have any further run-ins with the county and the law, and it is now up for discussion in Henrico. Still do not allow backyard chickens.
Trying to put a pen back in the right.
That is exactly right. We have 3 children that are living with us, and then we have an additional 2 children. One of them is grown, and Carlos also has another child. And Mia, Aiden, and Jessica are living with us and go to school here in Richmond County. And we've been married for 13 years. Try this time to be a little bit more precise.
There you go.
So, financials. We do have excellent credit that I will be more than happy to share with everyone here, because I know that anytime that you look at loaning some money, that's the big question: are these people responsible? And I'm happy to report that we are, and our numbers say so. And we are asking for loan consideration for $50,000. And we'll get into a little bit more detail of why we're asking for this amount. We currently have no credit obligations outside of our existing mortgage, and that we have about $85,000 of equity in our mortgage, and we're planning on financing our business through savings. So what is our mission? We are looking to provide a wholesome, mainly locally sourced, fresh Mexican food of the highest quality with impeccable service. Like I said, we do believe in organic farming, and not that we think it's possible to really run a business that only serves organic food. It would be a very nice thing if there was an grow some of the food that is being served at our hopefully future restaurant, and to provide an opportunity for local farmers to provide raw materials to the business. And I'm really interested in pursuing a business that is locally based, that is locally supported, and eventually we're really hoping to also have all of our meat to come from local farmers. But we're not under the illusion that that's going to be how we're going to be able to operate and open it, because I think it requires some education of our future customers, and also the realization that that comes at a higher price than most people are probably willing to pay on a daily basis. So I think it will be a process to get there. So what drives us is really establishing a family-friendly quality restaurant with impeccable service. I do think that Goochland and the growing community is ready for another restaurant option as something that is reliable and provides service that really entices people to come back. I think in this community, the only way to survive is if you're able to have repeat business and your customers are happy with the service that they're receiving and they're coming back. Even though there is a growing community and there's a new influx of people, once you have gone through those new people, if you can't make them happy, you will have a hard time running a business that stays profitable. And since we have children, and we go pretty much anywhere and everywhere with our children, it is important to us to have a dining experience for the entire family in a friendly and stylish environment. Live music in an outdoor space is something that's high on our priority list. I know that made some people nervous. I'm not into heavy metal or mariachi music, not to worry. We're just trying to have some Bluegrass music and really a space where people can go and have a drink and be entertained and have some music. Community is important to us. I know that when we first started talking about this, we talked to Lisa and the farmers market and what are the opportunities and possibilities to have something right in town, locally. So growing Goochland community and educating people about wholesome food and farmers markets and healthy living is high on our priority list. Again, providing locally sourced, responsibly raised meat is part of a long-term goal that we are actively trying to pursue. And we would love to have some sort of garden space with any restaurant. So I know that some of you have probably seen our previous application where we had a different location. Okay. So one thing that we have learned that it is really, really, really hard in Goochland County to find suitable business space. So this was actually our original location that we had kind of scouted out several months ago, and we had come to an agreement with the owners, and we had worked out all of the terms, and then we came to the county, and then we were told, well, so fast. This entire property will have to be paid. In order for there to be a restaurant, there's a requirement, Goochland County, that requires for parking to be paid, which I have my personal opinion about that I'm going to keep to myself right now. But it really brought up a very quick problem. This property is not for sale, so our agreement is a rental agreement, and we quickly got a couple of estimates on what we were looking at and how much money this would cost to pay parking lot, and it's not expensive. So that's not a small investment. And say again, $50,000. around about $50,000 to have the parking lot paved.
So 30 parking lots.
Is it on both sides of the building?
So that's really on the acre lot behind and the access road. There already is a parking space for handicap parking,
Okay.
but only for one. It would require two with the amount of seats that we're looking for. And in essence, I actually just had a conversation with Greg Harrison this morning about the ability to access and how the traffic would have to flow. But either way, either which way you cut it and slice it, to have access from both sides of the building. And we had dreamed of having a patio on one side. That's really no longer possible because unless you're paving the entire acre lot behind, in addition, there's no way to put 30 parking lots and have a 24-foot access lane and a patio. So when we learned this, we went to the owners and we had a meeting, and the building is in trust, which makes it a little bit more difficult to make decisions. And the owners had invested X amount of money to have some of the tanks that were in the back of the property removed because it was an environmental hazard. And they really weren't looking into investing another $50,000 to pave the parking lot. And because of that, and because we really couldn't get an answer, yes or no, are you willing to sell the property, we moved on to looking for additional property. And here again, what we learned is that there really isn't anything. There is the 250 Will, which in my opinion is really too far from Woodhouse and has some other issues of
It's septic.
it's a septic system,
limit,
and well water, it limits you in how many seats you can have, and it's just not in a location that we really feel would be allowing us to realize some of the things that we feel are important for this business that we're envisioning. So that's how we ended up talking with Mr. Bill Neal about a beautiful house. We went and did a lot of homework and research that it was way bigger of a project than we kind of felt ready to bite off. But we were assured that there should be financing available, and we're going to make it work. And I guess we got kind of swept up in the excitement of that. We did make an offer and ended up having to pull out after spending a significant amount of money in trying to get this project moving, because unfortunately Mr. Neal became nervous about the financing and was no longer willing to go on the terms that we had agreed upon. So it just so happened that at the community meeting for the rezoning, which the property, the Neal House would have required, the owners of the former Java Jody's building also own property that's adjacent to that. And we had a really long conversation that night at the community meeting, and they expressed interest that they were still very interested in renting the property to us. And that's how we're now ending up being back looking at this original location that we had scouted out. However, there are still not able and willing to invest into having the parking lot paved. We are looking at a long-term lease so that it would make sense for us to be investing a significant amount of money. And given the circumstances that there really is no other available property, we've looked at pretty much every building that is in Bushland Courthouse and outside of something in the strip mall that is twice the amount of rent that this building would be, and would really offer us the ability to have a garden and have green space and outdoor seating. There is nothing available. So since meanwhile we had learned about the Economic Development Council and that there are loans available, we decided to present to you guys and see if there's an opportunity to fund this parking lot project so that we could potentially move forward and realize our dream. So this is the building. I'm sure everyone is familiar with it. I went with some friends that are currently visiting from California that are relocating here. You see, I already bring my new customers in. Oh, it needs a lot of renovation. It really doesn't. I mean, it needs some cosmetic stuff. It needs some painting. But in essence, the building is sound and does not require a whole lot of work inside. It's basically an empty box that requires a commercial kitchen and the seating and some nice new paint. But outside of that, there is no major work that would need to be done.
Where is your parking area?
So this right here is actually the existing handicap parking platform, but it only accommodates for one, and so we would have to have a second one. And what we're looking at is having the entire acre lot behind it. And there currently is no plot available for this property. It has been ordered. So there is question as to where the actual property line runs, and that will be really important to be able to determine if there has to be traffic from both sides of the building. If the entrance and exit can be on the left side of the building, then that makes it significantly easier because you wouldn't have to pave the entire right side as well. And I really think that encasing this building into asphalt will really take a lot of the charm away. I mean, I had an opportunity this past weekend to drive through Gordonsville, and I think maybe everyone in Richmond should take a trip to Gordonsville and to see the difference in how viable their business community is in downtown and what the properties look like. I really think that we could learn something. But the rules are the rules. I have already been told asking for a waiver on the paving is a waste of time. It's not going to happen on this property. On the Neal house, there was actually consideration because of the historic nature of the house. But on this one, I was told it's a waste of my time.
Did my staff tell you that?
I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
Because you have the right to ask for anything you want.
Yeah.
What staff would have to recommend that's consistent with the law the board has adopted may be a different thing, but you have the right to always ask.
We first thing we asked them and they kind of let it know us at the beginning. We can get away for the house, but not for that one. That's it. And also, when I bring the engineer for the parking lot, if you are doing the left side entries and out with the 30 parking lot in there, that around like 44, 45 plus the $4,000 or $5,000 which I got to have the engineer thing is about 50. If I had to do an entrance in here and out there, it don't cost me more. I already know that. Yeah. And we ask Junaid the question because we kind of educate ourselves, and now they're asking for, we just ordered the owner, the black, because they don't find out this entry right there. They're supposed to is like
you think that there is an opportunity for me to ask? I'll be more than happy to ask.
Because you're in an overlay district here,
Right.
and there's a reason there's the standards that the board has adopted for the property. And so there's reasons why staff is probably saying the house wasn't in the overlay district because it sat so far back off the road. This is in the overlay district. So there's different standards that the law that the board has adopted. The staff basically looks at the rule book and says, this is what's permitted, this is not what's permitted. That being said, every applicant is afforded the right to be heard and a decision to be made. That being said, the board would have to make a variance to the law that they have, and then as they approve that, that means anyone else that wants the same, it starts to set precedent. So that's why they try to set those kinds of parameters. But you certainly have the right to ask.
A good thing they told me, this is the beginning because we started this last year, that because I don't have to pay. And that's when I went to the owner, we had a meeting, we had to pay papers, I had with the engineer with the price, and he was like surprised. And then we back in there and they said we cannot get away now.
And John, is that likely to be, for the owner, is that likely to be the same situation no matter what he puts in that building?
I don't want to speak on behalf of the planning staff, but there are limitations of what can go in there without certain improvements that meet the codes.
So it depends on the number of parking spots that you're required for the business.
Okay,
Yes.
so you have a higher
Anything
number of
under
parking
7
Yes,
parking
if
spots.
they told us, if it's under 10, they
Okay,
don't have to do it.
okay.
If it's, like for me, it requires 27 parking lot plus 3 for my employees, that'd be 30 parking lot. And, but they made it me clear over here in the county, it don't matter who come in there. If it's, business over 10 parking lot, they have to. Nobody can open up like 3 months.
9 is the cutoff. If it's 9 or less, it can be
Yes,
impervious. If
it's
10
good.
and up is paved.
It don't matter who come in there. That's what I'm
Is
saying.
it also true that there's no credit given for the parking lot across the street north between the old library building and
Reading credit given.
well, that's not considered a parking lot that's accessible to this also.
You know, they look at the strictly at adjacency.
Oh, you mean Bella Cecilia?
No, the parking,
It's another parking lot, but that's belong to that
Where
building.
Gordon
right
Construction is. where
yeah,
the-
it's actually
We own that building.
county parking lot.
but
We actually
each
tried
building
to,
has
We
its
even
own
called for that
occupancy
building.
requirements.
we tried to find out if there was a possibility to rent that parking lot separately, which still would have been very risky because then if you have a long-term lease and the rent of the parking lot falls through, then what are you going to do? So we really tried to find a solution to this from various different angles, and I understand that the rule was implemented to control dust. Is that correct?
Dust is a factor, but it's more of a standard that at some point the board adopted with recommendations from the overlay district committee and the planning commission adopted that they wanted this standard. And we have it in the courthouse and we also have it on East Broad Street. That if you build in these particular areas, you have to meet these kinds of standards. And then it's also based on how long this building's been vacant. So if a continuous use, like I can't remember if it's 3 or 5 years, but if another Java Jodi's came in within that window of Java Jodi's opening, they could have stayed with it as is. Now that it's sat vacant for such a period of time, it triggers a new set, it puts it into the requirement.
Yeah, unfortunately, that I think part of the reason why it's implemented is because of this requirement, because it is a significant investment, regardless if it's by the owners or somebody that wants to put a business in there. And from the standpoint of dust, I mean, there are other ways to control dust that are very effective. And from an environmental standpoint, asphalt is actually not that desirable, and definitely from an aesthetic aspect. And if I look at the property that the bakery was in, it's a shame. It looks like somebody has taken this beautiful old property and put it in the middle of a parking lot. It just aesthetically does not look all that pleasing. But if that's the only way that we're going to be able to have a business, then that's what we're going to have to look at. So, and I think we tried really every way to find another solution, and I certainly would be willing to try and ask the question. But
I
also,
don't want to promise you something that, I know we're
No, I
going to be
understand.
revisiting these standards, but as of right now, the guy across the street was required to build to those standards, and it becomes an equity and fairness question
absolutely.
as well.
Can I ask a quick question? Does the overlay go 50 yards or 100 yards?
It's feet, and I
It's
apologize,
feet.
I don't remember the exact number of feet off the road.
Do you know how wide that overlay is?
What?
I
That
know
is,
it's 150 feet, so I thought it was 50 feet. Do you know?
For
So it's just
the-
50 feet or 50 yards?
I thought it's 50 feet.
50 feet.
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head.
So if there's property behind the restaurant, if there's property behind that that's outside of the overlay, are we saying that does not need to be paved and that they can have a parking lot without paving behind?
I'm not a planner,
We,
I don't want to promise you stuff. and give you
no,
this
they
information.
want the parking lot because for the restaurant, I say it's gonna be like in that place.
That was really what we were hoping.
Yeah, that's
Right, well,
what,
I mean, the fact that the overlay is what is creating this constraint, I mean, if we're gonna go straight up with sort of planning, zoning, the overlay, and if we're outside that overlay, I'm not sure what the argument on the county's part can be with requiring the paving. I mean, I just don't know.
I will gladly bring those staff in
Okay.
to this
I was
board
just
meeting.
wondering if anyone
But
knew.
I don't think that, let me tell you, our staff, if we can make something work, my
Right.
goal is to tell people to get the yes, not
Okay.
to say no.
Okay.
And so if there was a standard that they're not making them jump through hoops that we don't want, that we think are unnecessary.
No, absolutely not. I mean, your
it's-
staff has been more than
it's
helpful.
no,
in
they answer pretty much any question we have, because anytime we need some help, we come to them.
you know.
And that's really what they came
That-
for.
that's
So, and we'd like
Here's
to
what
see
it
this
looks
go into
like.
production too, there's value to it.
And I had when we designed with the deck on the side, but not any longer that, because if it not gonna force me to do the entrance and get out there, I prefer not have the patio there, we can put it in the back. We already look at that, it's plenty space in the back. Because it's like it's wide enough
Mhm.
to go entrance and out here without
Think.
the.
Until we
Well,
get the
no,
plot, we don't
because
really know.
I had the 15 foot for 20 because it's a big door in there, and that short and supposedly be so many feet from the patio to the road, and that's why they told me you're gonna have to do this in and out. But if I don't do this, maybe it's an office space to in and out, and then one in the left side.
So we will have a plot within the next week and a half
Yeah.
that the owners have ordered, and then we will know for sure if the property line runs where we think it runs, there are 50 feet on one side, and then there's enough room to have entrance and exit on the left side of the building.
Only.
Parking in the back on the acre lot, and it is my hope that we will be able to have a patio in the back with green space and some space for farmers market.
Because it's pretty big in the back.
And if you didn't have to pave it, would it be just gravel?
Yes.
Another option,
Yes, I mean, but
which is much more affordable.
It is significantly more affordable, also maybe from an environmental standpoint. I think it would be much better, and also aesthetically, I find it more pleasing in a rural environment and an old building, to have gravel, to have the ability to have some green space.
Portsmouth has to keep that.
I was gonna say, next to Sunset.
And not in
Park Drive.
courthouse.
I know, I don't know.
this is because it's courthouse.
Right,
That's,
right,
that's,
And Sunset Grill is a gravel parking as well.
So it sounds like it would be overlay
You
that's
couldn't build Sunset Grill again.
Right, I know.
There's no gravel.
I'm not trying to start the rival.
You talk to your lead in part of that parking lot.
Look, all I can promise you on this is that if there's a way to get to the requirements, that's one thing, but there's also the law, so you have to consider it under the standards that exist today. It doesn't mean they shouldn't be looked at over time, reviewed, and maybe reconsidered. They are what they are today, that we have to review the case on that today, so we have to work.
what we understand is because this is so close to the courthouse, that's.
So, I would love to be involved if there is a review of the current standard, because I did some reading on the certifications for old buildings, and I think that there might be a great opportunity for Boucher County to be one of the smaller communities to come out and run with other communities and look at what are the possibilities of preserving some old buildings and having some environmental upgrades done that would really be very beneficial long term for the county.
We are in the process of doing a 2-year zoning rewrite that's gonna look at every zoning district, every classification, every requirement, but it is a process. So you're certainly welcome to engage in that process. I think we know some of our stuff is outdated and could be better and could be reviewed, but it's sort of, the rule book on this day is what it is, and so we know we need to look at it more globally. There's trade-offs. Every time you say, you don't have to do it here, but you can do it there. Anytime you create a rule, someone that pre-existed it may gain in this way than this. we do try to look at some of the equity decisions that we have to make as well. So certainly from talking with staff, I don't think they misdirected you. But we as staff can only tell you what we would have to recommend based on the law. Boards have right to make individual decisions.
And that is exactly what they had communicated to us, but there was an indication that on the other building, we had more of a case.
Yeah, on the building, they, you know.
And at this point, we have been actively working to really identify a location, and we're kind of anxious to get started. We didn't anticipate that it would take us 8 months to figure out the location for the building and work around some of the little roadblocks that we have found. So I'm more than happy to ask the question. All the board can say is no, absolutely not. But I also don't want to further delay. And in conversations with Matt, the question came up: are you guys going to ask for variance or not? Well, I picked up the phone and I asked your staff and I said, what are the chances? And they said, pretty slim. I don't think they misdirected us. I think they just shared, what they felt was.
Just so we've had other people come in looking at this location to do different kinds of things. Just in almost 2 years that I've been here, I think there's been at least 3 or 4 other prospects.
The owner told us about.
And there was different reasons for each one of them of why it wasn't going to work. Some of it was plumbing related. There were just different issues for different users.
One thing the owner made it clear to us: before you come to me, go to the county, go find out. And that's when we discover. Always we discover something.
Yeah.
Like right now, we discover about the plat and it's like that.
That'll be critical. Staff probably was using the plats they had, or we're using our
There
GIS
is
to
none.
give you.
There really is none.
What we have is sort of an electronic mapping system that we use. They probably were referencing that, but at the end of the day, the plat drives what they can tell you can do and can't do.
Yeah.
So that's going to be critical to get some final recommendations.
And that's exactly the recommendation that we had. So I'm not trying to indicate that your staff did anything that they weren't supposed to. They've been nothing but helpful
And I'm not.
and very patient.
I always, when I hear that, I'm just like, we can't tell applicants that they don't have a right to ask for something.
No,
No,
and that is
no,
not
no.
how the conversation went. So we are looking to leave the property as much in the original condition as possible because it is a beautiful old building and I love the character. We do want to preserve the rural feel of the building, the lot, and add community benefits, having a space for families to come hang out and maybe listen to some music and have a good time. Outdoor patio is big on our priority list. I don't know, depending on how the parking lot is going to end up, what that's going to look like. It would have been kind of ideal to have it on the left side because there's the beautiful farm sliding door, which would have made it very convenient for people to be able to go out to the patio. But it doesn't look like that might be possible. And then again, live music, no mariachi, I promise. It'll be calm, bluegrass. The quieter kind of entertainment. So, what questions do you have for us?
In your, I'm going to jump to your financials.
Okay. That is Carlos's world. I have nothing to do with those.
That's where I spend my life.
I feel for you.
Thanks. The 300,000 is coming from where?
So we have $200,000 in
200.
savings, and then we are taking out $100,000 in loan estimated.
In loans.
Estimated.
All right. And then with that, I understand you're going to buy most of this, the fixed assets for $245,000.
Yes.
And then you have the rest in current assets, and that pretty much burns off that. Now the included in here, there is no 50,000 included for the parking lot, right?
That is correct, because at the time that we submitted the financials to you, we were still at the other property where there would not have been the $50,000
Okay.
for.
kind of inspections have you done? John mentioned something a minute ago that kind of piqued my interest, that possibly, and I say possibly, some of the earlier investigations of using the building had potential plumbing issues. And clearly, if you're going to run a restaurant, you got to have plumbing. So where are you in that process?
Well, right now, I'm in touch with the contracts, but I cannot bring nobody to, before I sit down with the owner, sign up the final, because we're still working some little details, like, asking him for months, and I don't see it's gonna be a problem for that. He already offered me 2, and, I would like to have 4 months from his standpoint and then go. But the plumbing, I already went inside the building a couple times and with my friends, and of course I gotta do with the plumbing for the kitchen, I gotta be professional, and for the, I'm going to do a small bar.
Right.
But I don't see any issue with plumbing there because I run the water, they got 2 bathrooms, and also it's a sink, and we turn the water, and that's the first thing I
This
did.
was a coffee.
Yeah. So there were some rumors that an angry husband poured some concrete
Concrete
down
and
some
the drain, and the drain. But that's you can see it's like a heart. The concrete is in there, and the drains in there. They say they put concrete there, but that's
So the drain was covered up,
It's
but when
covered
a
up.
professional kitchen is being put in,
I gotta
to
do it.
reestablish a drain, and it's not going to be that big of an issue. So unless there are main lines that were concreted up that we are not aware of, there were no plumbing issues.
Yeah, because I turned the water anytime I went there. I went, like I said, at least 3 times.
Didn't come out of
No,
your feet.
no, I mean,
Whatever.
everything is running right. Yeah.
There's limited plumbing in the place to begin with, right? And some of the fixtures were removed by the last tenant.
So there's bathroom plumbing,
It's 2 bathrooms.
and there is running water in the kitchen,
And
and
it's the
there is
same.
running water in the front of the building. And the only
Yeah, outside.
issue that we were aware of is that someone had poured
Her
down
husband for
the drain,
the drain.
and the kitchen was
That's
covered
what we
up,
thought.
that's not an
Even the
issue.
owner told us.
It's not.
Because he went with me the first time.
No concrete there, or?
No, it is concrete.
Oh, there
It
is
is
concrete.
concrete. Yeah.
I said it was a rumor. Oh.
No, it is
It's
concrete.
covered up, the
It's
drain
covered.
is
The
covered
drain-
up,
One drain is
so it
covered.
wouldn't have to
One.
be reestablished.
Oh, okay.
But it's another one, because the wall is so thick in here.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm planning with the kitchen here.
Yeah.
Another part, it's all measured and everything,
Right.
Yeah. But
So if there's something that we need to be aware of,
it's something I know, we know, I mean,
It wasn't so much of an issue for the one person that brought it up to us because they weren't doing the kind of operation we were going to do. So I assume you probably done better investigation of it than the one folks did.
first thing I did, like I said, I went and run over and over the water, turn the water, and,
The good news is you're on public water and sewer there, so it's, if there is a problem, it's between the building and our connection. So
Yes.
it's not so bad.
So I asked Carlos this question already, but I'll ask him in front of the authority. If you don't get the loan from the EDA, what alternatives do you have?
It pretty much, put in $250,000 from a parking there, and I'm gonna be kind of honest, I'm kind of walk away, because I'm a little, it's just, because I don't own the property. I'm willing to pay the loan, but if the owner not come over and then he made it clear, like if we want it, pretty much we gotta do it, and
Has he given you any consideration for putting in improvements to the property?
yes, so they are willing
Yeah.
to give us, between 2 and 4 months of no rent to get the building up and running and open. And, also the rent is very reasonable for the area. I mean, we looked at every other
he wants 2,500, and he will knock out the 500, and give me $2,000. And anywhere in here, I know it's $3,000. Even if I want to go 250, it costs me $2,900 out there. And also over there, it's only 455.
So I don't think
I mean,
that they're trying to be unreasonable and not, invest money. I don't know how much money they had to invest in getting the tanks removed. We did inquire if they would be willing to sell the building, but since they put in trust, they're not at that point yet. But they would like to see, some use of the building and,
John, would it be your opinion, that those tanks only need to get removed because there's a new use, or isn't there,
I think there was an environmental issue.
Yeah, there
At the
was
time the
environmental.
property was for sale, and we actually looked at purchasing it. And nobody will, give a loan on a property that has those tanks in the ground because they're an environmental.
is it oil tanks, or?
Yes.
Yeah, because I've been in that property right when they put the sign. And I talked to the real estate wife, and that's when they're coming back with me and never come back. And then they're off the market, and the owner died. This is her daughter. And they own 2 properties beside them in the Neil's
She's
property.
very environmentally concerned and took the property immediately off the market when they learned and invested into having those tanks removed. DHEC is involved in long-term soil sampling for the property.
Which
So-
I thought was
I have just a question on your spreadsheet. The tax was at $56,000. Is that?
That's for the no.
Seems very high.
No. That's when coming the
It's not property taxes.
no. That's not property taxes. That's
Right,
that's
I wonder if
sales, but
that's-
that's for the amount. That's the sales taxes. But that's not gonna be every month. Yeah, that's for 1 year.
Got it.
Yeah, that's for 1 year. Yeah.
We're planning on making $1 million.
I think that's quite impressive. Okay, thank you.
So I do think that they're reasonable and are trying to make this work, but are not really able at this point to invest the $50,000 to get somebody in. We are looking to invest at least $250,000 in getting this building open. So adding an additional $50,000, we would have to take them out in a conventional loan. I don't really know if that's going to be possible. That's why we've gone to another property when we learned about the requirements.
Anybody else have any other questions? Do we need to finish up a few other?
Was the property, was there some kind of environmental mediation that occurred, or?
Were you talking about the loss, just like, is that, yeah, was that, yeah, is there an underground, is it leaking?
I don't know much about the property. I can bring our staff in to answer some of these questions. I have not been engaged in these conversations on the property use side.
Yeah, I'll suggest that there was some action taken, but I don't know if it was certified or.
Well, I think that's what you were just saying, wasn't it, that they removed,
Yes.
I thought, because we actually looked at the property too, so, and I thought they were leaking underground storage tanks.
Yeah,
The
but they removed-
possibilities, right, and you
Yeah.
either fill them with like sand or whatever that remediation would be, removing them is obviously the most
They
expensive.
removed.
So they were removed,
I
DHEC
think that's
became
what-
involved, and their soil sampling, and the owners went to DHEC and asked them, if it's paved over, is that going to be a problem? They said it is infected.
Yeah, if you soil sample and the tanks are, and there's been no leak, then you can fill them with sand so they don't cave in.
Right.
They clearly were
But
leaking.
once you find out
Right.
there's leaks,
I think there was a
you have to
question whether there
remediate all
was, right,
dirt.
yeah.
It wasn't leaking. That's what
You don't have a choice though.
So I don't know what the extent was of the investment, but there was a significant amount of investment that the owners made to the property.
Once you find out,
Yes.
you don't have a choice.
Madam Chair, can I- just some clarification. You're asking for an unsecured loan. You're not the owner of the property, so the beneficiary of the improvement is the owner of the property.
is correct.
That's correct.
And so, obviously, you're talking about a $250,000 investment, that's nothing small. And so you have a commitment to see this being successful.
Correct.
But should you not be, you're still on the hook for the loan.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a risk that we're taking. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a tendency of coming through on our commitments and a proven record of that. Given the fact that there's really no other option, the only other option that we would have is win the lottery and buy the house, not likely to happen, or go to a building that I really don't think will give us what it is that we're looking for in our dream restaurant. So, given the fact that we're looking at a long-term lease, if we can secure a low interest loan that we have some time to pay off, then I think it makes sense to take a bite and say, you know, this is the right location and this is where we can run a business that can be profitable. So, it is our intention to make it successful.
The only good thing for us, so for me, I would say is sign up a long term, and that's the plan for 10 years. That's what we want me to. And,
Is there a request in your, for the 50,000, is there a term you're asking for, or are you looking for the EDA to propose one to you, should they consider it?
So I believe that when we asked that question, we were told that you would make a decision on what the terms would be, and then we say this what we do or this we can't do.
Do you have any type of proposal for what the terms to be yourselves?
We do not. Be more than happy to bring one forward.
I kind of gave them the impression, as they said, that if the EDA chose to move forward, then it would be up to them to decide whatever terms they felt adequate and go from there, as opposed to having the applicant propose terms.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
you guys.
Let's
See you
go
again.
find our various children that are responsible.
Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
Sharon, hopefully, it's not going to be the last time I'm going to see you here because I should have it. And by the way, if you don't know, but I represent Goochland County in soccer. I'm the only one with a travel team. And I'm coaching with Mr. Geyer, the superintendent for the schools. We've been doing this 2 years. We just hired 3 more kids. Give a chance to Goochland, and we continue. And they kind of worry if I'm coming to the restaurant. I said, don't worry, it's only going to be effective. Thank you so much.
And they did not say anything bad.
Thanks for coming.
Hello, Miss Lisa.
Yeah, have a great night.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you. This one from each landscaping, it's either 175 bucks.
Yeah, see, and I thought it was 150 for whatever reason. And then I was wondering with the plat that's behind it, I still don't understand the answer to that question, which is if it's outside of the overlay, but it's a part of the package, if they need to just pay what's in the overlay, once they're outside the overlay, if they need to pay at all.
I think the answer to that, because the front business is in the overlay, my guess is it triggers the requirement around it. And so I think from the footage issue, even if the parking's outside of the overlay, it's still a requirement of the main business. Matthew, were you
I think
using
it's,
some of those?
I think possibly it's even an ordinance issue more so
Oh,
than just the
interesting.
overlay. I
Okay.
think the ordinance says
Okay.
overnight parking spaces required.
Okay, well, that's totally different than.
But again, I'm not a planner myself,
And that was
so.
the same issue that Livermore had, but they aren't in the overlay district, but it was still an ordinance.
They had to
for
request a
overnight.
waiver of what they were doing, so.
Alright, so, we can continue to discuss this alone, or we can move on? The next item on our list to discuss is the parameters for our loan entry process.
Can I suggest that hold that, up or down? Before we move on.
Do we need to have more of a
I think it's a great idea for that space, and I think it fits well for Goochland with that family-friendly area, serving low cost, food everybody likes. I think it would be a boon to the area. I'd like to see them be successful.
I agree.
They sound like they're doing hard work and committed.
Can I ask you, there's successful businesses there right now, and we're ready.
Oh, that was Cecilia
Across the street, right, where our liability about.
This is courthouse, right? That's where it is. As you're leaving here, going east, where it's,
It's
right
just
in
right into the car dealership on the left.
Okay, Paris,
Yeah. And on the right, you have the down, it's kind of underneath there, that's where the butcher shop was there, where it used to be.
yeah.
I don't know what else is in there.
The shopping center right there on the right. Is that been successful?
Well, Bella Cecilia is been there for a while, and there's a hairdresser there. The butcher shop has come and gone.
Ice cream
And
shop.
it had some, and a chamber is there.
Chamber.
Okay.
And then, Goochland Cares was there just temporarily while they're building.
Yeah.
And then there's a dialysis center around the other side. On the back side.
Apologize for being leaving. There's a courthouse and I don't cater except for meetings. So I don't really understand if there's core successful retail businesses or restaurants.
There's an antique store next to them that's open by chance or appointment.
It will pass away.
And then Roma across the street, there's another antique store and a consignment store. I guess my concerns would be that they're asking for an unsecured loan on a brand new business, so I don't know that I would feel comfortable loaning money that was unsecured. Well, you could ask for a promissory note, personal promissory note.
I'd also like kind of more information about the site itself because I don't know what is in the back with regards to the paving is just a solution over the top of it or if there are other issues. I simply don't know that much about the property.
I think we have to get that, sorry, I think we have to get that plat, I think that's the starting point. They really can't negotiate much there until they know what they're getting, right?
Right, the plat, I think one issue, but I think the environmental issue is, there's stories that go with that property, these, with the oil.
Right.
Well, actually multiple petroleum, as far as I understand, based sale point. So there are different grades of fuels that were available there. And at different times, different methods of disposal and leakage. So that to me would be very interesting to understand. But the plat, I'm a little surprised that the courthouse wouldn't have that available.
I agree.
Staff probably had to go by something to get to some of those conclusions, even if it's what we have reported in GIS. But I will say, that being said, every time new plats come into the record, we correct our GIS system. If that hasn't been platted in the long term, we're probably going from the boundary of a Ford dealer and the next closest property that has been platted. And so you just go by the best judgment you can.
Yeah, and I was thinking more from their requests from the owner of the original plat. I guess I would have thought because that entire piece of property was in, let's say, the holding of what is now the trust, or actually the original owner, I would have thought that that would have been promptly recorded in the courthouse. GIS, the standing, and I know there are some problems on the other side of the property line, one of the houses over there, but yeah, I think there's a lot of information I'd like to have for us before we go forward. And if we look back to the place further down the road, the barbecue place where I think one consideration was they are putting forth the money that would the lease situation was really question, but I'm interested
Mhm.
in moving forward. It's just, there's a lot of cautionary issues I know.
Yeah, I would be, I'm where you are, Ben, except my concerns are the inspection, the internal inspection of the building. You know, do they have their estimates right? So I wouldn't be willing to commit to the loan until they stepped up and proved a bunch of stuff. And I may be where you are, Lisa, that maybe we don't go all 50, maybe we venture out to do 30. I think not going out on a limb here to help stimulate some economic development in the courthouse area would be the wrong thing to do. So I think it's going to take us some risk here. If there were other properties, seems like they've investigated almost any of the property. So either we're never going to have any other restaurants, and unless somebody comes to town with a lot of money, they're going to build their own building, or we're going to have to help and assist in projects like this. So I'm kind of, I think we ought to try to support it, but they've got some work to do first to help reduce our exposure on an unsecured loan.
So what do they need, some sort of inspectors, reports?
Well, I'm coming at this from, where DD, I don't get to the courthouse very often. I've never been in that building. I have no idea whether there's asbestos in that building. I have no idea whether
Well, it was a restaurant not too long ago, so it did pass PDH inspection, so that.
I don't have that reference point, so that's where my concern comes from.
What response do then, if there were any leaking with those tanks, I mean, it would be on the EPA hazard list. I'm sure we would know whether or not.
But that seems to be what the landlord has agreed to take care of.
They already have taken care of it. So the way that happens is if there's an underground storage tank that sounds like it was leaking, then the EPA does test, you do remediate, and then they continue to test. So it sounds like that's no longer an issue.
That always falls back on chain of title as well,
And it
so
does,
the
and
owner would be responsible for
And it's
making
joint and several, the liability is, the liability is on, right, so that wouldn't be our risk, certainly, nor would it be theirs.
You're saying it's the owners of the building's risk.
Correct.
Even
Or
if
any
you sell-
previous
even if you sell property, it always follows back to the chain of title, so it would certainly not be on a leaseholder to remedy that or anybody's loading that money to them.
So we don't need satisfaction on that.
Well, and it would be easy enough to look up. I mean, the EPA has an NPL list. I mean, there is like a list that you can just see. It's very, I mean, if they're doing their due diligence, then it should be very easy to look up. That would take me 5 minutes.
Well, there should be a certificate after it's been remediated.
Well, DEQ would probably, well, yeah, I mean, doesn't the county, the county would know.
We may have all these
Right,
questions answered.
exactly.
And so I just,
They should.
I'm not as aware, the staff has been engaged with them in numerous conversations. So
We'll find out.
Yeah, that's an easy
we
question.
can certainly follow up on that.
I guess my other thought, my thoughts go to, are we putting the cart before the horses? We do have to decide what the parameters of our loan application process is going to be. Are we going to consider another brand new business, or are we at the cap of what we would loan out per annum? How much risk do we want to be exposed to, and considering how much we have in the bank as a percentage of our overall funds? And what are we striving to achieve by loaning the money? Those are the kind of things I would like us to decide before we.
I think this is a perfect example of what we're striving to achieve personally.
Do we know
You
that?
know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, in concept,
I could challenge that concept because I don't.
really.
I have no clue until we sit down with the board of supervisors of what they want to spend a finite amount of money on. Is it backfill on vacant space, which there's value to that? Is it funding aspirational businesses, and to what level? Is it utilizing our resources to attract new business? Where do we put a finite amount of funds Because I honestly don't know if what the answer to that is. Because if you go to every restaurateur that's in the courthouse area today, and trust me, if someone wants another courthouse option, it's a guy like me who eats here 2 and 3 times a day. I think it would be good to have some shared goals and objectives that we try to achieve. And if at the end of the day, that goal is to incentivize startups, we put our powder to incentivize startups. If our goal is to make sure every vacant building in Goochland has a tenant, we put our powder there. If it is to attract X number of new jobs and new technologies or new job sectors, we put our powder and resources there. That's where I'm struggling a little bit with, and that's why we sent these questions. I think there's some broader policy stuff that.
Excuse me. Let me ask a question. If you're hung up here, then why do we just have them come in and entertain their conversation?
Because.
Why did we waste their time?
Because that's the process that's established right now. And I'm challenging.
No, it's not. It didn't have to be.
Well, I beg to differ. Because as the staff that's
We
trying to
could have
deal
told
with
them that we weren't ready to loan money, that we were doing work on this, and not had them waste their time.
Well, I challenged this question at the last meeting.
I think these questions are good questions, and I think we need to do it. I don't know if it's in the scope of one of these Wednesday night meetings. These are just discussion points.
I agree with
This is hours of work, I think, to decide this question. Not like, let's make a decision right now at 6:45.
you. But keep in mind, Mr. Hall, if you want to make a decision on this one, you can make a decision on this one
I
and
don't want to
things
make a
going
decision
forward.
on this loan. I'm just tired of the debate. We either need to get on with this work and get it done. You know what I mean?
I'm with you.
I'm just tired of the debate.
I want to help put the resources where we can be the most successful collectively. And so, but I don't know if we've asked these questions, and some of that is our challenge, is our fault. We haven't come to you and said, look, we don't have parameters because right now, if 10 other people walk in tomorrow, what parameters do I tell them that we have on the loan program? How much money can you ask for? What kind of terms can you ask for? What parameters? We don't have them. And so we're here trying to get that. The guidance, and yes, the strategic plan hasn't been done as soon as we'd like it to have been done. I think that's the guidance that we do together.
So that
But it's not being done. I think that's the frustration. I think we've been having this conversation in the EDA since I've been here,
Yes.
right? And my term's up in February, so I've been here for 3 years, and we've been having this conversation since I've been here. And we're continually waiting on the Board of Supervisors, or we're continually waiting on other people to start maybe some sort of loan program. And it is tiresome. And so this is not any longer the process, and that was kind of my comment last month, is it seems to just be inertia. There just seems to be nothing that's coming together to get done. And it is frustrating because it does leave us with absolutely no authority as an authority. And so that's kind of, I feel like what we've been doing for the last several years has already been set in place. And we're just kind of saying, okay, but not really, you're disagreeing, right? But I mean, I do think that, like the loan, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. So I think that the only thing we've made decisions on are things that decisions have been made and we've been told to go ahead and do that because, if that makes sense, there's not like a whole lot of, there isn't authority, like to be frank, there just isn't. And so I think if this is going to be a cooperative endeavor, then there needs to be an actual conversation occurring and not the promise of a conversation occurring that is continually put off.
I can understand coordinating this with a supervisor, but we are in an organization.
And that's exactly where I was going. We can decide right now to make this loan. And the board can't stop us according to the Code of Virginia. I mean, we can do this. We can set our own standards for all of this right now. And so I'll put part of the blame on us as opposed to anybody else because we can make that determination. We set up the form. Well, there's a generalized form or the Code of the Code of Virginia that says you have to ask these questions and answer these questions, right?
Right, we should be independent, you're correct.
Well, we are.
Right, okay,
By the code.
by code, yeah, by
And
code, we're
the board
independent.
appoints us, but so we can set up, I don't put the blame on them.
I'm not,
Well,
right,
I
and
don't mean to
it's
say
not
blame,
blame
but
so much, right, it's, blame is a strong word. So, I mean, but I share the frustration, which is, yeah, I mean, I do, in the sense that it's like, why, you know, so it is up to us to decide, which perhaps we should, right?
and I mean, I understand what Rick's saying also, because he
Well, the one with Licking Hole, wasn't that, how, the history of that came through, how did that get decided? Because that was like right when I came aboard, I don't even remember how that got decided.
you mean, what was the actual method used?
The process, did it come through the Board of Supervisors?
No,
It came straight from the authority?
it was straight.
And that was also before, we came on here together.
And it was a while before.
We did have some parameters for that one, not many, but we
The
had some.
minutes,
We
the
had some
minutes, put it back to
economic,
the minutes, they'll reflect your
What
discussion.
parameters are you, what do you?
well, we had some economic incentives that they had to meet certain criteria in order for us to forgive a portion
No,
of
so
that
the
loan.
loan was crafted, again, the board was not involved, that was an EDA-driven loan. The parameters were $40,000 amortized over 5 years. They had, the loan was amortized over 5 years with quarterly payments, with the option of a $10,000 forgiveness. It was set up so that quarterly payments, and there's a $10,000 balloon payment to do at the end. If they met certain criteria, there was 3 criteria established, 3 benchmarks established. One was tax revenue, one was capital investment, one was employment growth. If they hit 2 of the 3 targets in that period, then they had the opportunity to forgive, or the EDA had the opportunity to forgive the balloon payment at the end.
And how did, so I'm assuming that you kind of came up with those parameters, so the 2 of the 3 different.
The EDA came up with the parameters of what those numbers, what they felt was adequate return on investment, and
Yeah,
I
it was
may-
back to Marshall.
I may have helped come up with those, but it was the EDA's.
Because we're an independent authority, it was our,
It
Oh,
was-
yeah, no, you helped to come up with it. I
It was
think,
the
but I don't
EDA,
remember.
so again, it was based on, I think it was doubling the current employment figures, it was adding, I might be misquoting, but $350,000 capital investment over that 5-year period, and then maintaining a certain tax base that was paid to the county, and as of right now, they've met, I think, 2 of the 3, so they're on track to be able to be forgiven that balloon payment.
So I do think that if we loan them the money that we have, we should have something tied back to economic growth. Some kind of, it can't just be, here's the money, you're a brand new business, we're just gonna give you the money.
Well, that's my forgiveness question. Yeah, and I don't know that I do another forgiveness one, but again, you have the option of, just like a bank has the option of doing, now they have portfolios of these types of businesses that are only going to invest X amount in that. We're not there, we're not that sophisticated, and we don't do that many.
It should be employee related, because we kind of got small business and it's got a good idea, and the people that needs to work the rest of it, so. I don't know if that would have to be helpful in a parameter of this.
So with Licking Hole, again, I might be making this up, but let's say there was 5 required full-time equivalents, you were able to benefit somebody that wouldn't necessarily have a full-time staff, they were able to add part-time workers and full-time equivalents to get to that number. And it was, again, I don't think any of the benchmarks that were set up to be extremely challenging to meet. They were based on their business plan and their growth projections is where those numbers came from. And I believe the decision at the time was prime plus 1 maybe was the rate determined. And again, same situation, the EDA determined all conditions of that loan after the request was made, and then went back to the applicant and said, here's what we're willing to do. So it's the same situation.
And I think we could do the same thing in this case too, set forth the terms and so forth. Personally, I still have those questions, but it's up to us.
please know where I'm coming from is I share exactly your frustration. Because we want the most successful counties and EDAs working together share a vision and goal. You guys have different, always will have different authority under statute. But if we're working together, and ultimately, yours, Matthew, who provides support, and Lisa, who provides support, reports to me, if we're working together, we can be more effective with you. And I admit, I had hoped to have these conversations much sooner than we were. I know Becky before me wanted to have this cleaned up and never could get to it. Those conversations need to happen. I truly agree. Because I think as we go through this, as we start understanding, well, we can use the tools that are provided to independent EDAs to help move a collective goal, we're going to be substantially much more successful. You as an EDA will feel much more valued in the economic development process than you probably do now, because there are so many more things you could be doing as an EDA if you wanted to. That some you don't even know what other EDAs do, so we can bring those tools to you. You can find out how we can create better reoccurring revenues for you so we can sustain the work that the EDA can do independent of what the county can do. There are a lot of things as an EDA that you could be doing that we are not currently doing as a county.
Stopping that progress.
I think something in my area with working with Matthew just since I've been here is because I'm not sure we understand. We all, yes, we want more capital investment, more jobs. But where are we targeting our efforts? Because when you got one staff and an EDA that's volunteer and committing to this process, and board, where do we put our efforts? Where do we really channel those efforts, and can we do them in support of one another?
The strategic planning process.
That's exactly what my hope is for that process, and I'll admit I've been focused somewhere else over the past year, and want to get together and be working with you to achieve these goals. Yes, you can give them a loan today and someone else a loan tomorrow, but who administers them? Who does the collections when you give the loan? You know, there's some fundamental questions that I think from a process standpoint we do need to work out. And so, you know, forget what goals we're trying to achieve or who, you know, that I think needs work. But
That's not strategic.
there's process pieces, policy pieces, and strategic pieces.
It starts with what, the board.
Well, I
getting
think
us involved, or
I think it's a joint effort with the board and you.
I think at this point, we need to make a decision of whether we want to move forward with potentially loaning the money to this couple. And if we do so, I think an ad hoc committee needs to come up with what parameters we want to give to that particular loan. And then maybe we revise it in the future as we move forward with our strategic plan. Maybe we don't.
I think we need to address this. In all fairness, I think we need to address it.
But do we do that right now by voting yes or no, or do we come up with some a proposal to come back with the committee to say, here's how we think as an EDA we should structure this loan if we decide to do it.
well, like Mr. Dunleavy's, I think wholly. I think we have a generalized idea. Rick has concerns, I have concerns. You have concerns about security. I didn't hear any negatives, other than we're looking for more information. And we have those concerns. It's not a no, because we feel that the courthouse needs to be developed. This building's been sitting vacant for quite a while now. I'd like to see that if there's been any mediation on the site, because there's other issues. Anyway, so I think we can at least admittedly say, yeah, there's interest now in terms of forming this committee. I think that's a reasonable approach to try and gather the information, gather you know, what we would like to propose in this instance, and we can move rapidly. But at the same time, you know, obviously the county's going to have a lot of information because they've been doing work with this site and I guess the application also. So I don't know if
Carlos worked with an SBA.
Okay, good. I just wanna know whether, right?
So,
So
say,
think about
to
that.
basically say, yay, or
Yes,
nay,
yeah.
go forward with this loan, put some parameters on it, and then hold our loan program till we go through with the board on longer term parameters for other loans.
That's what I would.
I like Lisa, I think you're right, go for it, maybe, maybe, whatever.
Okay.
Regardless, we have to have some kind of terms to offer. I don't think that we should ask them to come up with terms.
So for the sake of efficiency, if the idea is to support this moving forward, would it be possible for me to request that y'all have maybe an idea of what that amount may be and the timing so that to form a committee, come back the next month and then decide, okay, we want to move forward? I mean, I guess from a sheer timing standpoint, do you think this is something that's going to be done in 30 days, 60 days?
I think in their minds, the 50 is a pretty concrete number, because it's all about the paving, and they haven't allocated for that at all. So I don't think we're being very friendly to give them 25 or 30, because it doesn't remove, it sounds like they're at their breaking point to me. But we need to find out whether they can gravel it first. I mean, that's a big, I think that's a point of concern, that if they don't have to spend the 50, then, right? So we should need more information.
So one other thing just a point of history, with the Licking Hole project, that was the loan was tied specifically to paving. If I recall, the EDA requested actual quotes. They wanted to see where the money was going. If that's the extent, again, I'm just trying in my head to figure out timing wise, is this something you want to be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, tomorrow, like just kind of what is?
Seems to me that, we should move as quickly as possible. I think they're kind of at their wits' end about this stuff, and want to get moving, so it's good.
Should we go ahead and vote on it and say with certain, that we will do it with certain reasonable expectations of achieving finding the plat?
Well, Madam Chair, may I suggest that you have the right to form a committee to do so, and then tax them with the effort for the terms and conditions, looking at the issues that have been raised, all the issues, etc., and then bring that back to the next meeting of the committee. I think that, I don't know what their schedule is. Maybe that's one I could ask that question. I don't think it's pronounced anywhere in here what the schedule is.
I think they're ready to sign the lease, but they can't sign the lease without knowing whether they get this loan.
And I think assuming, let's just say there's not a Superfund site, and if they pull the trigger on phase 1, phase 2 environmental, that's $10,000-15,000 right there. So if you're looking for that to be done to, I guess, remedy your concerns, I think that's going to be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, and see, I don't even know what that is, so
I will look it up tonight.
here's
I
obviously
will-
an expert.
Yes, I will send you an email tonight. I will send you all an
I
email.
would make that request of them, but not for them to go do the work. If they were smart, I'd make pass that request on to the landlord and say, listen, I can't move forward.
I'd made a few suggestions to them of things they should be requesting the landlord, and they were told the landlord is no longer participating. I think is kind of what they conveyed to me, that he wasn't going to take on the expense of providing it.
Well, then if that's the case, then I fall in a different place, which is not to support the loan, because they're walking down a path that they shouldn't go.
Right.
And we're walking down the path we should go.
And so we can create questions to drive that out and see if we can all get comfortable, and if we can, at the end of the day, then we say,
So if it's not on the EPA list as a site, are you requesting phase 1, phase 2? Is that something that you want them to provide?
well, you're trying to answer the solution right now as opposed to, come up with what the action's going to be, which is to assign a committee to go and do that work. I think we're just,
Getting too far.
we're throwing things at the wall now.
Is your concern about the phase one, phase two? Was that what you were talking about?
No.
Okay, that's what I didn't, I thought there were two different conversations.
No, I
Just-
think
okay,
before we give anybody money,
right,
we ought to be happy that the property is clean of all environmental issues.
okay.
And I don't think that should be something they take on, but something that they pass on to the landlord.
It's not their responsibility.
It's,
Right, so.
So there's proof that the landlord can come back to say, here's the work we did, here's the
We
certificate,
should have,
they now have a clean bill of health.
We'll have to share with you.
or we get that out of the way, we move on.
Who would volunteer to be on this committee?
I don't know.
So Lucy and Kurt. Just the two, right?
Okay, so we'll come back with some recommendations on how we could structure this if everything else lines up. So in the meantime, what do you think we should communicate to Carlos and for now?
And we formed the committee, we formed the committee, so,
And,
so discouraging, doesn't it?
tell them to thank them for their time, and, we have a couple questions that we need to consider. Land, county,
And that if they do ask to go through the variance process, it's probably about 60 to 90 days. And so, because it has to go to the planning commission first and then come back to the board. Matthew, is that correct? And so we can, even expedited, it's about a 60-day process. I'd even tell you, pay their fee just to let them go through the process if they're worried about it. Because if there is a way that the board would actually consider it, why make the investment? But I need to really sit down with my staff and understand what concerns they had. We may be able to share with you more information than any of us in this room know right now about the site. So I think there's some valid questions that need to be asked and information we can provide to the committee that may help you get more comfortable with what direction you go.
Well, that certainly will help.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
Lucy, get through their activities.
because otherwise it's dead end. Good, most of it.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on.
Yep.
We have consideration of payment to Vacor for $2,275 for insurance.
Right.
We don't need a vote on that.
No, they haven't sent- I actually had that because I wasn't sure if you were gonna have your June 20th meeting, and I wanted to have a consent if they did invoice, we could pay. But you're gonna need your June 20 meeting, I believe, because the email from John Silvack, so we should have them in this by now.
Is there a risk man, a county risk manager that overlooks at what coverages are here and what coverages aren't here? How do we know that we're covered in the right areas and appropriate?
Health, right? Is that-
Well, I know what's been done historically, but I don't know that any person with expertise has actually looked at it.
That's what Vacor does on our.
Okay.
That's their primary role, other than brokering the insurance policy. So.
Yeah, in one sense, in the past, we have increased some of the amounts, for example, the wrongful act and so forth. For example, right now, I'm a little curious about the environmental liability. We only have the one lot remaining, and I'm not sure.
That's the DNP.
Yes, and I'm not sure that's applicable. We really have to go back to our council, because our council, in one sense, isn't, they don't have risk management. I don't think associated with Claire Ryan. I don't know if they have. But I understand your concern. I'm not sure we have all the liability. I don't think we're undercovered now. I think we might be overcovered in particular dealing gracious if there is a risk management
Sorry, guys.
individual.
I mean, just from a pricing perspective, you've got, on cyber risk, you've got, 500,000 per occurrence in aggregate per member, and then you've got 5 million combined aggregate for all members. Well, shortly, we're gonna be down 5, so 5 times 500,000, you only need 2.5 million in aggregate. So there may be some dollars to get out of here, and I'm not really doing it from a dollar and cents perspective.
Right.
I'm more concerned about, do we have the right coverages, and I just don't know, I don't really know what Vacor is, and so I just asked that question.
And I think it's a legitimate question to ask.
I think we've approved it in the past because it's been similar to what we did prior to that, but I don't know that there's ever been and whether there actually is a risk manager in the county.
We have someone assigned to that function, but they're not skilled enough to look at those coverages.
Maybe we should go back to Repair Ryan and see that if they have a risk management person that could look at this
Peruse the document.
and just peruse the document.
That's all I have.
Would you like me to do that, to forward it to?
Well, it's
Claire?
up to everybody else.
Yeah,
And I've reviewed, it hasn't been reviewed ever since I've been on the board, so it's probably a good idea to at least review it. We have someone independent review it. Okay, let's move on to, the discussion on the ordinance to amend section 2.106, director's qualifications, terms, and vacancies, etc. to change the number of members on the Houston County Economic Development Authority Board of Directors pursuant to a recent change in the state law. Has everybody had a chance to look at
The authority action requested, the authority is requested to provide information from the board. What's this about, like that?
Well, the board, the ordinance will come before the board. It's proposed to come before the board in July, and the board would vote on the ordinance. And so the board could say, EDA, we want you to cut the last person you appointed to reduce, to get to 5. So so we're saying to you, the board would like you to give you the opportunity to discuss amongst yourself how you would like to reduce your number to be in compliance with the ordinance. And then I would just let them know the authority has decided to, first person to rotate off, last person to be appointed.
So I'm gonna,
Mr. Hall just did
They don't have to.
I'm gonna shorten the discussion here. In the last 2 days, I've resigned, effective July 1st, and I forwarded that to Lisa and to Kurt. My term is the first one to expire, so it makes sense from that perspective. And there are other reasons that I shared with him that I'm not gonna share in the public meeting. And this will effectively be my last meeting, because I am out of town on July 20th, or June 20th. So,
And then Andy's is already expired.
Yeah.
So we're,
So that would put you at 5.
and there's not a decision or choice that the board has on that. Right. So I've also informed Mrs. Bennett about it.
Is there any further discussion about the ordinance?
Pretty cut and dry.
What is, I just had the, what is the, origin of this ordinance? Change statewide. Does anybody have a history of that? Why are they?
I think localities have the option, and the board, I think, part of their original, I guess when they came on 6 years ago, whatever, I think reduced the planning commission, I believe,
Yes.
to align the commission's appointed positions to align the same makeup of the board, so 5 to 5. So I guess the planning commission went from 7 or 8 to 5.
We didn't used
I
to
want to
have
say they were
this
10,
10,
10, 2 per
2
district.
per district.
And brought them to 5.
There's multiple localities to 5. There's other localities to 10, I think it's county specific. So for discretion, you just have to go to the General Assembly essentially to.
It's in your document, all the exceptions are listed.
So this is something that we have to vote on.
Yes, and the phone one.
Alright, regarding this, ordinance change, all in favor of, approving it as written, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
So there's a motion and a second.
I'll
Is
second.
this just a
I'll second.
consensus?
Sorry.
Because we're
Yeah, I like
saying,
the other
Mr.
kind of
Hall,
motion.
Yes.
with the, it should say who is being reduced as part of the motion.
I'm not sure that we have, I'm not sure we're moving to accept the ordinance, because isn't the ordinance just the ordinance?
Well, it hasn't been approved yet by the board. It goes for public hearing in July.
So do we need a motion?
Right.
Well, I need to know who would want to come off of the
I think, as Mr. Hall stated, I think that addresses what will
his
go to the board.
resignation.
So you can move to accept this resignation.
Okay.
No, I'm
Let's
not-
do it.
Just give it a second and first.
I'm not sure you need a formal motion from the EDA on this at this
Right.
point. The board will either adopt the ordinance that the state amended this year on our behalf. Mr. Hall has indicated he had resigned prior. Mr. Donnelly's term is up. Basically, that addresses and aligns that.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll move to the next item. There's no bills to be paid. Matt, do you have any new business?
Just a quick update, yesterday, the ribbon cutting for Sheltering Arms, or I guess the groundbreaking, the ribbon cutting they announced would be 2 years, they're saying 2020 is gonna be the official opening. It was pretty well attended. I think BC did the most speaking out of everybody, but, I think it's gonna be a good project, and it sounds like they're gonna be moving along fairly quickly. Also spoke with the, hotel developer yesterday, and he indicated they're hoping to break ground next month. So that'll be running in conjunction with Sheltering Arms. If you haven't been out to the Notch, the pad, they've already started, all the trees are already gone, so he knows that, and they're gonna start, grading here pretty soon. There's gonna be a lot of heavy equipment moving, and then also, I think it's safe to say, we also had a meeting with a assisted living facility, to also be going in the Notch. It's gonna be about a $200 million project, so, it's gonna be assisted living in place all the way from independent living on up to full-on acute care. So it'd be a good addition to the county. It's a very established developer, so we're excited about that project. And that essentially builds out the Notch, short of maybe 40 acres, give or take. So more to come on that project in the coming weeks, but they as well are looking to move pretty quickly.
Assisted living is definitely, that's their.
They've met with staff, so I would say the ink is not dry on all the contracts, but they've already been meeting with staff and engineers. They have a design development team in place. So obviously nothing is 100% until it's open, but all signs are.
Multi-service type operation is.
It is. It's complete age in place. There's about 1,400 independent living units. I forget what the total square footage is, but it's large. It's very, very large. Probably the biggest thing. It'll look like Capital One almost when it's all said and done.
What's the capital outlay?
Estimates are over 200 million.
And it's in the
Taxable.
Targo Creek Services District.
It is. And it is taxable. So
Or,
lots of water users. Yep.
that's what, 600. I mean, I'm just trying to figure the amount of money we'll get up the end of one tax shop.
Yeah, I mean, the 200 million, assuming that's all in, let's say the real estate value is 75, 80 million, half of that times 32. I mean, it's gonna be pretty, just connection fees alone. I mean, it's gonna be a pretty large boon for the county. Doesn't solve all the problems, but it's a step in the right direction. So,
District Force salutes you.
yes.
Keeps those rates stable for a long period of time, so that one project alone would do it. I think each hunt alone did it.
Yeah, I
I'm looking at increments, meet the reserve requirements, meet the acceleration of that. Take one step at a time. Right now, I'd be satisfied. No increase.
We don't project an increase in rates, so the question is, will we pay down sooner or decrease?
Yeah.
And there's different parts of the bonds that can be paid off at different.
Good news.
Is there any other business?
One, I'm going to personally apologize to Mr. Hall this meeting because I just didn't provide him the respect he deserves, but I have tremendous respect for him. And I'm sorry to see that you're not going to be honest because I value the challenge that you provide to us and make our process better. That being said, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that either the suggestion that was made earlier that we either, as it relates to the loan program, we're the face of the loan program when a business comes to us. And so at some point, whether it's the same committee or another committee, even if just give us parameters that we can work with applicants to be able to give them guidance through a process. If the committee can help just in that framework, I think it would go a long way as we go through this. If someone else comes in tomorrow, do we continue looking to go through the process? Do we want to advise them that we're not accepting applications for 60 days or some kind of process?
Double we the staff, planning staff,
Primarily Matthew, ultimately he's the one that ends up engaging with these folks. I think there is some value just even at a high level, narrowing down some of the focus.
I'm sorry, I think Mr. Podesta, we put some quick parameters on because if someone comes in tomorrow, we're not ready to face it. We're barely facing this one. And we need more information to be clear about it. So I think we need to suspend our loan application program for at least 60 days. Till we get these parameters worked out. No?
I think it's fair for anybody to bring forth and for us to consider. We're a separate entity and, that's part of our purpose. So,
For what it's worth, as of today, there's nobody in the
Right, I
hopper.
was just gonna say, so.
That's not to
Thank
say
you.
that there's not people watching this right now that might come part of it. There's nobody, to my knowledge, waiting in the wings today.
and we work through it as we work through it. It's up to us to get it done.
All right, there's nothing else. I will close the meeting. Thank you.